subcommittee has been working on a transportation report. Which is available on the website publictransportation.columbiacountiny.ny.com. So that report is it sort of details a lot of things about transportation that's going on, both for public transportation and for transportation services beyond just public transportation. This is the committee, so we had a bunch of people working on it, both county supervisors and sort of like key stakeholders. Claire Pardee, who's on the call, is one of the people sort of who have been working sort of with the committee on this draft report. And the draft report builds off of the county's 2017 transportation coordination plan. So every county in New York State has an approved transportation plan that's approved by DOT. So our county in 2017 is when we adopted our transportation plan, and the plan has a bunch of sort of key points that sort of identify the key things that the county wants to move into. And part of our draft report reviews that 2017 plan, identifies sort of the status of where we're at. And then the report is a stepping stone to updating our countywide transportation plan. So after we sort of complete this report, get public feedback, we'll sort of move into a planning phase where we'll identify sort of what are the next stages of the county's transportation plan. Having these approved transportation plans is really key to then getting state and federal funding. So it's important. So this is sort of an important step for us to be ambitious about what our next steps are in terms of transportation. The transportation report also builds off of previous sort of studies that have been done around the county. One of them is the Columbia Green Workforce Plan, which, quote, says the lack of public transportation in our rural area is always an issue that limits not only access to the career center, but also access to other workforce preparation services and job opportunities for many of our most in-need residents. So what this is saying is that public transportation is a really key service in terms of our workforce and economic development. We also have the county did a housing study and also noted that the lack of public transportation is linked to sort of housing issues. Is that we've seen a lot of people leave the city of Hudson and move to other parts of the county where there's less transportation services available. And so in order to sort of keep addressing the needs of where people are living, there's a gap in transportation services. So one of the things the report does is sort of document the available services that exist now. So in last year, public transportation provided over 30,000 rides in the year. We also have all these point-to-point transportation services, things like the Healthcare Consortium, which provides sort of medical transportation from people sort of call and make a single appointment. And those actually provided over 40,000 trips last year. So actually that sort of vein of transportation services actually outflanked the public transportation services. One of the things the report did is sort of detail the availability of or the sort of the usage of public transit. So you can see in this graph, it sort of documents each one of the transportation routes. We have a route that goes to Albany. The shopping shuttle goes between Hudson and Greenport. There's a route that sort of goes from Copake to Greenport, Germantown to Greenport, Philmont to Greenport, and then sort of tracks their usage across the years. What we saw is sort of a big dip during the beginning of the pandemic in 20 and 21, and then starting to increase in 2022. We actually had more riders in the shopping shuttle in 2022 than we did pre-pandemic. And the shopping shuttle by far has the highest amount of sort of riders per mile. We also document the numerous transportation providers outside of public transportation. This includes county agencies as well as agencies that are, nonprofit agencies beyond the county. We also documented demographic data, looking at places where the most no vehicle households or the highest density, those are the kinds of places that might be the easiest to provide transportation services. We also noted that most transportation users are over the age of 60, and looking at demographic trends, we're expecting to see a real boost in the population of people over 70. So that might be an increasing need to provide transportation to seniors. We also mapped a bunch of points of interest. These are sort of like destinations and locations where we think people are most likely to want to go in the county, including economic centers, medical centers, educational places, other points of interest. One of the key items in the transportation plan, the approved plan, was the idea of hiring a mobility manager, somebody who would work for the county and think about how to coordinate both public transportation services and other transportation services. And that's an action that we have not completed. So right now, sort of all of the transportation work that happens is sort of done by a piecemeal by a bunch of different staff, and there's nobody at the county whose job it is to sort of in their job description is to oversee public transit. So it means that we have a lot of staff members who are sort of carving out time in their day to sort of figure out how to support county transportation, including Kelly, who's on this call right now. So thank you for all the work that you're doing to help this. So it means that we have a lot of people sort of pulling together to make this program happen, but we don't necessarily have one single person who's overseeing, really thinking about how to improve things. And because of that, I think we've had some difficulty in securing sort of like timely grant investments and those kinds of things over the years, although currently we've been catching up on some of those gaps because of our staffing. So here's sort of like what we're looking for the rest of the meeting. Some ideas, if you want to make comments, is you can comment on the draft report, you can share your experience with transportation services, or you can just make suggestions for improvement to transportation services in the county. Earlier in the month, we had an in-person meeting. Here we are with our virtual meeting, and we'll accept written comments through next week. So through next Tuesday, you can also submit written comments. And with that, I will end the presentation and open it up for comments. Tistry, do you want to go first?
Sure. Thank you so much. First, I want to say thank you to you, Michael, and your committee, and Kelly, and Claire, and everyone, Bob Gibson, everyone that's been working so hard on this. It's such an important need for our residents. I did submit a written comment to you, Michael. I think I should forward it to Sherry, because it sounds like that is the person to submit written comments to. But I have one comment on the report via your presentation, and then I'd like to just read into the record a letter that's from myself, as well as Supervisor Collins and Supervisor Adams. So one thing that came up for me in the presentation is the map about points of interest. New Lebanon has a lot, actually, compared to a lot of other towns similar to the population of New Lebanon. New Lebanon was closer to the areas like Hudson and Greenport as far as the density of the points of interest, yet we have no connection to New Lebanon. And so in my mind as supervisor of New Lebanon, I'm thinking more about my residents and their need to go elsewhere, because we don't have a lot. We have no doctors in New Lebanon. We are soon getting a grocery store and pharmacy, which will be great. But my focus has been a lot of getting people from New Lebanon to doctor's appointments and places they need to be. After seeing the map of the points of interest, I think there's also another point to look at, which is that there are many things in New Lebanon that other residents would like to come in and visit. And that would be great for our tourism and other things. And so I think it's a two-way street. And my focus before was really on getting residents where they need to go. And so now I'm also going to think about that other piece that I would like to put on the record, that people might want to come here for our points of interest. That said, I have a short and sweet letter. I will email it to Sherry officially to get it in the record. To the Transportation Subcommittee, the towns of New Lebanon, Canaan, and Chatham currently have no public transportation access through the county plan. We would like the lack of access and a proposal to remedy the lack of access to be identified in the update to the county's transportation plan. We are proposing either a bus or a van route that goes from New Lebanon to Canaan to Chatham and then ends in Hudson. Residents could then do shopping, go to doctor's appointments, etc., and then get back on the shuttle to go back on the return route and drop off those residents. We're also very open to other proposals that would provide access to the county's public transportation to our side of the county. It is of the utmost importance that we get a plan into action to achieve the goal of public transportation for our residents. Thank you for your time and attention to this important matter, and it's signed by the supervisors of New Lebanon, Chatham, and Canaan. And in essence, we want the plan to note that we don't have access right now and that we need to have access. And we have some ideas, but we're also very open to this subcommittee or other people's ideas on how that might look. Bob Gibson and I talked the other day about potentially, a van that got leased and on maybe even the town's insurance, but through some funding that might be available through his office, and then we would have either a staff member or volunteers. So we're willing to be a partner in the solution as far as the town of New Lebanon goes, and I would assume Canaan and Chatham as well. But just to note for the record, our residents pay the same county taxes as all other residents, and yet there is a service being paid for through county taxes that isn't accessible by anybody in those towns. And so I think it's really important that we remedy that. I understand it's not going to be a bus route that runs every day. In my mind, it's maybe a once a week, maybe a twice a week shuttle that's advertised ahead of time with different pickup locations. So that's what I have to say. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Supervisor. Go ahead, Supervisor Collins.
I feel like Slim Pickens in the movie Blazing Saddles. Ditto. But I wanted to thank Supervisor Holtling for all of her comments that, of course, are very relevant to, the town of Chatham as well as New Lebanon. Obviously, Michael, we've talked a number of times about doing something to span the whole breadth to the northeastern corner of the county, and we're looking to help in any way we can with getting county services out to Chatham, Canaan, and New Lebanon. History was right. We have things to offer, and we have things that our residents need, both. So thank you again for all your efforts, and we look forward to working with you as partners moving ahead.
Thank you, Nell. Yes, Claire, want to go next?
Thanks, Supervisor. This has been another great public hearing, I think. Great presentation. I want to reiterate a point that I've made in the past, and that we often think of public transportation as public transit and public transit lines. And I just want to also mention that public support for transportation to the public, meaning public investment in providers of transportation that serves residents of Columbia County, is another key way in which we can support the mobility of our population. You made a great point, really salient point earlier, that it's actually in combination, the private providers, usually private not-for-profit providers of transportation services, are actually providing more rides than the public transit lines themselves, and there is insufficient support. So, we have been solving a problem, the problem of moving Columbia County residents around for many years, but that has become increasingly challenged, and the capacity to produce that value in the future is really concerned. It's really, is really challenged right now. So just thinking holistically about both thinking of public transportation as both public transit systems, but also public investment in transportation systems that serve the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Any other comments? Final call. Here's your chance. Do you want to say anything else?
Michael, did you want to explain what the next step is from here now that we've had the second public hearing?
Yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, so we'll keep the sort of the public hearing open for the next week to get written comments, and then from there the committee will take in the comments from the two hearings and the written comments and sort of reevaluate next steps. We'll probably sort of do a few sort of intentional focus groups to just make sure that we're sort of hitting some additional stakeholders, and then from there the committee will regroup, sort of take a look at the draft report and see if any changes need to be made to the draft report. And the draft report is really just a landscape analysis. It doesn't make any recommendations for improvements. So it'll sort of finalize that draft report, and then it'll move into the planning phase, which is sort of identifying what are the key things that we'd want to do in the next 5 to 10 years, and then create sort of a prioritization of those things, and then ultimately create like a 2023 Columbia County Transportation Plan for submission to the Department of Transportation. Well, thanks for your time. I really appreciate you showing up and showing your interest in the county's transportation services. And if there's no other comments, then I'll call an end to the public hearing.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Supervisor Shimides.
Thank you.